Are you really throwing it all away over one weekend? My wife sobbed. I changed the locks that night. 2 days later, she showed up screaming at my workplace. You think you know someone after sharing a bed for 5 years, after moving 3 times together, adopting a dog, planning for kids, after watching them cry at their father's funeral and laugh until they snort wine through their nose. After 5 fucking years of marriage, you think you know them. I didn't know Sarah at all. I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these stories, but here I am at 34, picking through the wreckage of what I thought was a rock-solid marriage. The kind people envied. You two are perfect together, they'd say, if only they could see us now. It started with an email, one of those mass alumni things universities send out to squeeze more money from graduates. Sarah's 10th college reunion was coming up, and she was excited about it. Genuinely excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. She showed me the invitation with this gleam in her eye, already planning what to wear, who she'd reconnect with. I was happy for her, happy to see that spark. We should book the hotel early, I suggested, already looking at options near her alma mater. Definitely, she agreed, squeezing my arm. I can't wait to show you around campus. For the next few weeks, reunion talk dominated our conversations. She'd reminisce about her college days, professors she loved, friends she missed. I listened attentively, glad to see her so animated. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first. She started taking calls in another room. Her phone suddenly had a passcode. She was working late more often. Classic signs, I know now, but when you trust someone completely, you don't see these red flags for what they are. Then came the conversation that would be the first domino in a long, painful collapse. About the reunion, she said one evening, eyes fixed on her wine glass instead of me. Turns out spouses aren't allowed. My bullshit detector pinged instantly. What? Yeah, they just announced it to keep it intimate for the alumni. Her voice had that forced casualness that screams deception. It's not a big deal, right? It's just a weekend. I nodded slowly, swallowing the questions that crowded my throat. Sure, if that's their policy. Something felt wrong, but I talked myself out of it. Why would she lie about something so easily verifiable? I trusted her, so I buried the unease that had taken root in my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sarah's breathing beside me was even, peaceful, the sleep of someone unburdened. Meanwhile, my mind raced. I carefully extracted myself from bed and grabbed my laptop. 3 clicks later, I was staring at the reunion website. There it was, in glossy university branding. We encourage alumni to bring spouses and partners to experience our beautiful campus. My stomach dropped to my knees, the first lie. I should have confronted her then. Instead, I did what any suspicious husband with wounded pride does. I started digging. Sarah's phone was suddenly glued to her hand, but she'd sync her accounts to our shared iPad years ago and never disconnected it. The messages started rolling in, notifications I wasn't meant to see. Most were innocent, group chats about the reunion, old friends reconnecting. Then a name kept appearing, Jason. Jason texted often. At first, the messages seemed friendly enough, then they turned flirtatious, then explicit. I felt sick reading them but couldn't stop, like watching a car crash in slow motion, my marriage being the thing destroyed. Can't wait to see you again, he wrote. It's been too long. Just a few more weeks, Sarah replied. I've missed you. Jason, the name was vaguely familiar. I scrolled through Sarah's Facebook back to photos from before we met. There he was, arms slung around her shoulders, both of them young and carefree, college boyfriend. I kept digging, found more messages, learned they'd been in contact for months. Discovered they had met up for coffee when he was in town for business. 3 times. The coffee wasn't innocent. Still, I waited, gathered evidence, watched her prepare for the reunion with meticulous care, new clothes, haircut, waxing, everything she'd skipped doing for our anniversary the month before. I'm just excited to see everyone, she explained when I commented on her preparations. The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly now. The weekend of the reunion arrived. Sarah kissed me goodbye Friday morning, suitcase in hand, promises to call that night. She did call, a brief, distracted conversation about how fun it was seeing everyone before rushing off to another event. I spent the weekend in a state of numb hyper-awareness, mechanically checking social media for updates. They came in real time, salt in the wound. Sarah tagged at various events, always with Jason somewhere in the frame, his arm around her waist, her leaning into him, laughing. Then came the comment that confirmed everything. Wish we could have met your husband. Jason barely let you out of his sight all weekend. I read it 3 times, each word a twist of the knife. Someone had no idea I hadn't been invited, that I'd been deliberately excluded. I took screenshots, downloaded images, saved messages, built my case meticulously like the project manager I am, all while my insides felt hollowed out with a rusty spoon. Sunday evening, Sarah returned. She floated through the door, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, happy in a way she hadn't been in our home for months. "How was it?" I asked, voice surprisingly steady. "Amazing," she gushed. "Just like old times, you would have been bored though, all inside jokes and reminiscing." "I'm good at adapting," I said. "If I'd been allowed to come." Something flickered in her eyes, caution. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean, Sarah." "Albert, what are you talking about?" Her face arranged itself into a mask of confusion, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twisting nervously. "Let me help refresh your memory," I said, sliding my laptop toward her. "The reunion website clearly states spouses are welcome. People in the photos are with their partners, so why wasn't I?" Her face hardened, not with guilt, with anger. "Have you been checking up on me? That's a violation of trust." I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "That's rich coming from you." "Nothing happened," she insisted, voice rising. "Jason and I are just friends. Friends who sexted for months, friends who met up 3 times behind my back, those kinds of friends." Her eyes widened. "You went through my phone." "I didn't have to. You never disconnected your messages from the iPad." The color drained from her face. She hadn't considered that loose end. "It's not what you think," she tried again, more desperate now. "It's exactly what I think. You've been planning this for months. Reconnecting with your ex, lying to me about spouses not being allowed, also you could have your little weekend getaway." "Albert, please." "I talked to Chris." Another lie. I hadn't spoken to Jason's friend, but Sarah didn't know that. It was a shot in the dark, her face crumpled. Bullseye. "What did he tell you?" "Everything," I said quietly. "That you two slept together, that it wasn't the first time." Her expression shifted like quicksand, first shock, then defensive anger. "You're spying on me?" Her voice turned razor-sharp. "Going through my messages, that's a violation, Albert." "Don't flip this around," I said. "Answer the question, did you sleep with him?" "This is ridiculous." She stood up pacing like a caged animal. "Jason and I are friends. We've always been friends. You're being paranoid. Friends don't send messages about how much they miss fucking each other." Her eyes flashed. "You're taking things out of context." "What context makes 'I can't wait to feel you inside me again' appropriate between married people and their exes?" She flinched, then switched tactics so fast I almost got whiplash. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her posture. "Okay, it happened." Her voice cracked, tears welling up. "But it was just physical, Albert. It didn't mean anything. All those messages, the planning, that wasn't just physical." "I made a mistake," she whispered, tears now streaming freely. "A terrible mistake, but 5 years of marriage has to be worth more than one stupid weekend." I almost laughed. One mistake. The months of deception, the multiple meetups, the elaborate lies, those weren't mistakes. They were choices, deliberate, calculated choices. "Pack your things," I said, voice flat. "You can stay with your sister until you figure something else out." She dropped to her knees in front of me, grabbing my hands. "Albert, please, we can fix this. People overcome affairs all the time. We'll get counseling." I pulled away like her touch would burn me. "This isn't just an affair, Sarah. This is systematic betrayal. You lied to my face for months. You gaslit me. You planned this." "I love you," she said, eyes wild with desperation. "Jason means nothing. If he meant nothing, why risk everything?" She had no answer for that. While she packed, I discovered one final knife to the heart, a drafted email to Jason from 2 months ago. "Can't wait to see you at the reunion. I've missed you so much. I'll tell Albert spouses aren't allowed so we can have the weekend to ourselves." Premeditated, every step. That night after she left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the life we'd built. Photos of us smiling on vacation. The couch we'd picked out together. The dog curled up beside me, confused by the sudden tension. It felt like a movie set now, a carefully constructed illusion of happiness. The next few weeks were a tsunami of emotions. Sarah cycled through tactics with desperate precision. First came the tearful apologies and promises to change. When those didn't work, she escalated to anger and blame. "If you hadn't been so focused on work, I wouldn't have strayed. You haven't been emotionally available. It was just physical. You're making it a bigger deal than it is." When none of that worked, she deployed the nuclear option, our future plans. What about the family we were going to start next year? She asked during one of her unannounced visits to the house. Are you really throwing that away? You threw it away, I reminded her, when you decided your college boyfriend was worth risking our marriage. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was the villain in this story. I started therapy, not couples counseling, individual therapy to figure out how I'd missed so many signs, how I'd trusted someone who had become a stranger. My therapist helped me see that Sarah's betrayal wasn't my failure, that her choices reflected her character, not my worth. The divorce process was a special kind of hell. First came Sarah's campaign of destruction. She drained our joint account before I could freeze it, $12,000 gone overnight. My lawyer said we'd get it back eventually, but eventually doesn't pay rent. She refused to move her stuff out, then claimed I'd thrown away her irreplaceable family heirlooms when I finally boxed it all up. Her legal tactics were just as dirty. She contested everything, the division of assets. The timeline even tried claiming part of my $401K from before we were married. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, each one designed to drain my bank account and my will to fight. She's trying to punish you, my lawyer explained. Make you so tired of fighting that you'll give her whatever she wants. But I wasn't giving in, not after what she'd done. Meanwhile, our social circle imploded. Sarah worked the phones like a political operative, sharing her carefully edited version of events. I was controlling. I'd neglected her. I'd driven her to Jason's arms. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. Some friends took her side immediately. Ashley, who'd been at our wedding, texted me, I always thought you two were wrong for each other. Hope you find peace. Then blocked me. Others tried to stay neutral, which felt almost worse. I don't want to get involved, they'd say, as if this were some petty disagreement about who should have won an Oscar. Mark, my buddy since high school, told me he was still going to Sarah's birthday party because it's complicated. The betrayal stung like alcohol on an open wound. Then came the unexpected allies. Ryan, who I'd always thought was more Sarah's friend than mine, showed up at my temporary apartment with beer and takeout. She tried to spin me some bullshit, he said simply. I wasn't buying it. Sarah's cousin Megan reached out next with information I hadn't known. This wasn't Sarah's first rodeo. She'd done the same thing to her college boyfriend, her ex-fiancé, before me, and Jason wasn't even the only one during our marriage. There had been others, briefer affairs, skillfully hidden. I should have told you years ago, Megan said, shame evident in her voice. But she's family and I thought maybe she'd changed. I'm sorry. That knowledge should have hurt more. Instead, it was clarifying. This wasn't about me, had never been about me. This was who Sarah was. She grew increasingly desperate as the divorce progressed. Tried to negotiate, offering to sign a postnuptial agreement, useless now. Suggested we try an open marriage, too late. Claimed she was depressed and needed my support, not my problem anymore. The turning point came when she showed up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby. Security had to escort her out while she screamed that I was throwing away 5 years over nothing. My boss was understanding, but the humiliation burned deep. I filed for a temporary restraining order the next day. The evidence was substantial, harassing messages, showing up uninvited, the workplace incident. The judge granted it immediately, which only made Sarah escalate her legal warfare. 8 excruciating months, 43 legal filings, and $31,000 in attorney fees later, our divorce was finalized. I kept the house but sold it. Too many memories contaminated those walls. Bought a smaller place closer to downtown. Kept the dog, started rebuilding. The social aftermath continued long after the legal battle ended. Our friends had split into 3 distinct camps. Team Sarah, Team Albert, and Team Wishy-Washy Middle Ground. Team Sarah was vocal, posting cryptic supportive messages on her social media. Some people throw away diamonds looking for stones. Real subtle, Karen. Team Albert was smaller but fiercely loyal. They'd seen through Sarah's narrative or had their own suspicions about her over the years. Ryan became a regular at my new place, bringing other friends who'd chosen my side. She invited me to lunch to clear the air, my coworker just told me over beers one night. Spent the whole time trying to convince me you were mentally unstable, asked if you'd ever been violent. She shook her head in disgust. I told her to get fucked. The middle grounders were the most frustrating. They'd reach out occasionally with carefully neutral messages. Hope you're doing okay, or thinking of you both during this difficult time. as if we were both suffering equally, both victims of some unavoidable natural disaster rather than Sarah's deliberate choices. I ignored most of them, until Dave, my former best man, texted 6 months after the divorce was final. "I know I handled this wrong," he wrote. "Sarah got to me first and I believed her version because it was easier. I should have asked for your side. I miss our friendship." I didn't respond immediately. Dave had ghosted me when I needed him most, then liked Sarah's passive-aggressive posts about narcissistic exes. His betrayal wasn't on Sarah's level, but it still cut deep. A week later, I finally replied, "You're right, you did handle it wrong, but I'm not interested in holding grudges. Coffee next week." We slowly rebuilt our friendship. It wasn't the same, couldn't be after what happened, but it was something. A reminder that not everything broken stays that way. Then came Sarah's final attempt, an email sent exactly 1 day after the restraining order expired. "I know we can't go back, but I miss my best friend. Can we at least try to be in each other's lives? I need closure." Closure, as if her actions hadn't closed every possible door between us. I read the email 3 times before crafting a response. Not in anger, but with a clarity that had been hard-won through months of therapy and reflection. "Sarah, I wish you well, but we don't have a place in each other's lives anymore. You weren't looking for closure when you planned your weekend with Jason, and you're not looking for closure now. You want to ease your guilt and keep me as a backup option. I deserve better than that. Please respect the boundaries I've established and don't contact me again." I hit send and felt a weight lift. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but release. 6 months later, Ryan mentioned that Sarah was engaged to someone new. Not Jason, apparently that imploded shortly after our divorce began. Some other guy, a quick rebound turned serious. I felt nothing but pity for him and hoped that maybe she'd changed. People can change, after all. I had. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to recognize red flags instead of explaining them away, to value myself enough to walk away from toxicity, no matter how comfortable it once felt. I started dating again recently, taking it slow, being honest about my past without letting it dictate my future. It's not easy, trusting again after such a fundamental betrayal, but I refuse to let Sarah's actions determine my capacity for connection. For anyone going through something similar, trust your gut. The pain of confronting the truth is nothing compared to the pain of living a lie. You'll survive the revelation, as brutal as it might be. And eventually, you'll realize it wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The start of an authentic life where you're no longer being deceived. The start of actually being able to breathe again.